All right. Good morning, everybody. I guess I should say good afternoon in India. So my name is Stephanie Farrell, and my permanent home is with Rowan University in the United States. I'm a professor of chemical engineering. But this year I am a Fulbright scholar in Dublin Institute of Technology in Ireland. And I'm going to be talking about some of the work that we're doing with spatial visualization at DIT and collaborators in the United States. And so spatial visualization is an overlooked cognitive ability that increases success in they're strongly linked with success in STEM, and I'm going to be talking about a little bit about the evidence that we have to support that. And one interesting thing about spatial skills are that there are differences in spatial ability that relate to gender, very strong differences relating to gender, culture, and socioeconomic status. And spatial skills can be taught in a relatively short time, unlike some of the other cognitive domains like verbal reasoning takes longer to teach, and mathematical ability takes a long time to develop, but spatial skills are taught in a relatively short time, and improving spatial skills increases academic performance and retention in STEM disciplines. The development of spatial skills really starts at a very early age, and you can see a childhood toy. I've shown a picture of a popular childhood toy that helps develop spatial skills in like a toddler age. And the development of the spatial abilities continues well into adulthood. And spatial skills can be developed through a variety of academic and non-academic activities. There's very well understood. There are a lot of different things that affect the development of spatial skills, and one of the things that plays a role is something like sports, especially sports that have that involve hand-eye coordination. Also, academic experiences like computer graphics courses and descriptive geometry can help to develop spatial skills. So psychologists have been looking at spatial skills for many, many years, and there are different models of cognition and different models of spatial ability, and I'm not going to go into the different ones that exist, but just as an example, one of the models of spatial abilities divides the skills into 3 different types, and these types are spatial perception, mental rotation, and spatial visualization. There are other models that list 5 or 6 different types of spatial skills, but the important thing is to realize that there are different types, and that some are more strongly linked with success in STEM than others. So spatial perception is the understanding of spatial relationships with respect to reference orientation. Mental rotation refers to the ability to rotate a figure, a 2- or 3-dimensional figure, and to do it accurately and rapidly. And then spatial visualization is really kind of a form of mental rotation, but it involves more complicated multi-step manipulations, and I will show an example of that as well. The figure to the right is a type of test problem for mental rotation, and the idea here is to identify images that are the same. So let's see, I think the bottom 2 images in this case are representations of each other. It's those complicated multi-step manipulations that are the ones that are most strongly linked with success in STEM. So that's the spatial visualization specific skill that's most strongly linked with success in STEM. And it's a type of thinking that it doesn't only apply to figures, but can be applied to problem solving as well. So if you think of like inverting matrices and things like that, you can use spatial thinking in order to solve problems that aren't related to physical objects. And here's an example of a test question. This is a spatial visualization test question from the Purdue Spatial Visualization Test. And so it starts out, and I'm going to give you a minute to try to solve this, because this is where it gets really fun, when you have these multi-step manipulations. So if you look at the target figure at the very top, it shows an object, and then it says that object is rotated, and then it shows on the right-hand side what that object looks like when it's rotated. So you need to first understand that manipulation, and then it shows you on the next line, it shows you here on my screen another object, and you're supposed to take that object and rotate it the same way as the object is rotated in the first line. So what does this object look like when it's rotated? And so you have to choose from among 5 choices. So I'll give you a minute, and you can convince yourself of the right answer. And now I'll show you.
Already.
Pardon?
People are sending you answers.
Oh, they're sending. Oh, that's great. Okay, are they still coming in? I minimized.
Just one or two. That's okay. One of them.
Okay, Krishna, you cut out, but
go ahead. One of them said D, and the other one said maybe E. Yeah, that's okay. You go ahead.
Okay. Yes, it's not so simple. Okay. So if you've had a moment to look at all the answers, I will now reveal the correct answer.
Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, yep, there we go. So the correct answer is D. The initial object was rotated about the vertical axis, a 90-degree rotation. And so then you have to look at the object in the middle, which is this one, and rotate that also about the vertical axis in a 90-degree rotation. So the correct answer is D. These manipulations, this is a more complicated form than the test that I showed previously, because it involves a multi-step manipulation. You first have to figure out how the first object is rotated, and then you have to envision how the second object is rotated. An interesting thing about this, if you just think back to, you know, maybe the way you solved or tried to solve the problem, there's been a lot of research into whether people actually visualize the object, like, do you actually try to see the way the whole object is rotated, or do you take an analytical approach and look at parts of the object and imagine how those would be rotated and try to figure out the solution that way? And these are two, in the domain of psychology, like very different approaches, completely different approaches to solving that type of problem. The people who can envision the whole object rotating are more successful in STEM fields. So that's the skill that is really thought to be linked with success in STEM, is that ability to rotate the object rather than to solve the problem analytically. It's much faster as well to be able to rotate it. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the link with success in STEM. This has been studied for many years, starting, well, no, not starting, started many, many years ago, but there was a study in 1993 that looked at what we call group membership. So it looked at successful STEM academics and professionals and looked at their spatial skills to see whether or not they had high spatial skills. And so it turned out that people who are successful in STEM fields do have high spatial skills relative to the general population. So that's one interesting finding. In terms of predicting academic success, Cheryl Sorby in the United States, who's one of our collaborators in our group that we're currently working with in Ireland, she has done interventions for and longitudinal studies for about 15 years, and she's shown that spatial skills are linked with academic achievement and retention in engineering college level. And then the graph that I've shown on the right-hand side is another study where they looked at people in different disciplines, from humanities to science, law, business, all different disciplines, and looked at their verbal reasoning ability, their math reasoning ability, and spatial skills. So what this study did, I think it's worth spending a couple of minutes on it because the implications are pretty important. In the United States, the college entrance criteria are strongly based on a standardized test called the SAT. And the SAT has a verbal reasoning component and a mathematical reasoning component. It's not a test that you prepare for by memorization because it really involves reasoning ability. So there are courses that can prepare students for it, but really it's testing the ability that you've developed to go through a reasoning process. And spatial skills are similar in that way. Okay, so on this graph, the vertical axis is the SAT verbal score, and the horizontal axis is the SAT math score. And these are the tests that are used for college entrance selection criteria in the United States. Then the width of the arrow, or the length of the arrow, that's shown for each discipline is the spatial ability. So a longer arrow means that someone in that discipline has a higher spatial ability. So if you kind of digest, there's a lot of information on this graph because it's basically 3 dimensions and many different disciplines. But if you look at someone, for example, in the humanities, humanities is over here, people in the humanities tend to have high verbal skills, relatively high verbal skills, weaker math skills and weaker spatial skills because the arrow is smaller. Compared with people in engineering who are on the higher side of math, the long arrow means that they have high spatial abilities, and then the low position on the y-axis shows that their verbal skills tend to be weaker than people in other disciplines. Sciences, people in the sciences are high in verbal, high in math, and have pretty good spatial skills as well. So it's just an interesting comparison of all the different disciplines, and there's a lot of information on that graph, but I think it gives you a good feel for spatial abilities and how they relate to different academic and professional choices. The implication here that came out of this study that was really interesting is that in the United States, if students had been selected based on spatial ability, students in STEM fields had been selected based on spatial ability, it would have been a better predictor of their success in engineering than being selected just based on math and verbal. So it's really a neglected cognitive dimension. We don't test for, well, sometimes we test for it, but those test scores are never used for anything in terms of college selection. So if we started looking at spatial abilities when doing college selection, then that would be a better predictor of success. So I think that's an important finding. This is some more information that just shows that as students progress through different academic degrees in STEM fields, that they're differentiated more and more by their spatial abilities. So higher spatial abilities means a higher likelihood of going on for an advanced degree in a STEM field. This was a huge study that was done over 50 years, and it studied, I think that the N was over 400,000 people. So a lot of evidence to support the role of spatial skills in STEM success. Okay, so now let's talk about some differences. This was a study that was done in the general population, not in STEM fields, so and not even in college. It's really among the general population of adults in 53 different countries. And the top zigzaggy line is for men, and the bottom dashed zigzaggy line shows the spatial skills of women. And they're arranged by country. So there are a couple of really interesting things that emerge from these findings. The first thing is that the spatial skills of men are universally higher than the spatial skills of women. This difference is robust, and it's really important. So we'll talk about some of the implications of that. The other thing is that there's a lot of variation by country or culture, and this is not really very well understood. The gender difference has been very, very well studied in many different studies with large numbers of people. The cultural aspects of spatial skills, there's a lot of variation, but it's not really very well understood. It probably has a lot to do with the types of activities that children play when they're growing up, and the different types of education systems. So some things to note about this graph. I've just highlighted a couple things with the red dashed line. I added that line because in my research group, we've looked at the results from students in the United States and in Ireland, so I highlighted those. The students in the States outperform the students in Ireland significantly, but in the United States we certainly don't have the best spatial skills in comparison with some other really high-performing countries like Norway. Okay, and then look over here at India. I've highlighted India, and the spatial skills of Indian people in the general population is very low. We don't know about the STEM students in India because that hasn't been studied at all. But in the general population, it's low. And again, you know, it probably just has something to do with the types of activities that children do when they're growing up, and maybe the type of coursework that students are exposed to in their education. So this is something that I think deserves a closer look, and it would be really interesting to look at what the spatial skills are like in the STEM professions. What we've seen so far in our work that we've done in Ireland is that looking at first-year STEM students, the spatial skills pretty much reflect what we saw in the previous study in the general population. So we don't have data from very many countries around the world, but if you look at Ireland, Germany, Poland, and we did a little bit of work with students from the Gulf states as well this year when I was in Ireland. So the students from Germany and Poland outperform the students from Ireland and from the Gulf states. And then on another test of spatial ability, the PSVT, which is the one that's most closely linked with STEM, we only have data from the US, from Ireland, and from students from the Gulf states. And we saw that the students from Ireland lag behind the students from the from the US, and then the Gulf state students are lower. And so this has implications. Like in Ireland, we have a number of students from sort of a pipeline of students from the Gulf states, and so we're now considering developing a spatial skills intervention to support those students who are coming in, because they spend a year before they start their STEM degree program. They spend a year in Ireland learning, improving their English, and doing some other coursework at the university that's not related to the STEM degree. So we're considering maybe introducing a spatial skills intervention for those students during that access year that prepares them for their STEM degree program. So the implication is that poor spatial skills may put some groups at risk for poor academic performance, or for even for leaving STEM. And the groups that would be most affected by this are women, and because we saw that there's a universal difference between the spatial abilities of women and men, and also students by nationality. So, you know, we have some evidence of regarding the Gulf state students in Ireland. We don't know about students in India. We know that in the general population, the spatial skills are lower, but we don't know about the STEM students. So the good news is that spatial skills can be improved in a relatively short period of time. And the types of studies that have been done are both direct studies and indirect studies. The direct studies are programs that are developed to teach students how to solve spatial tasks, similar to the ones that are given in the tests. So you take a training, you learn how to do these problems, and you perform better on the tests. It's not a surprise, but there's a lot of evidence to show that that these skills are transferable and that they do help with academic performance and retention in STEM. Then there's also indirect methods, and the indirect methods are like introducing spatial skills into relevant coursework, like if there's a computer graphics class, or introducing spatially intense problems into the appropriate courses, and that can help develop spatial skills. And then finally, another indirect method is video games, and many people are happy to hear that there's a known benefit from video games. So there, I'll talk about some studies that were done with video games. But the nice thing about that is that that you don't have to take away class time in order to do that type of intervention. It can be assigned completely outside of class. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the direct spatial skills training. I'll probably spend the most time on this because this has been studied the best, and so there's a lot of strong evidence coming out of these studies that shows the link with success in STEM. So most of the work in this area with the direct training has come out of Michigan Tech University, and this is Cheryl Sorby's research group. She has developed a 10-week course in spatial skills training, and so this course it's 2 hours of lecture and 2 hours of lab per week, and it's for academic credit. And in the States, this is worth 3 credits, 3 academic credits. So it's the same weight as a typical university level course. And so the lab component of this course, it involves 3 types of activities. One type is working with manipulatives or blocks. We use these snap cubes that are shown on the left. Another element is sketching, doing orthographic sketches and projections and things like that. And then the third element is using computer software, and these are basically like videos that show objects rotating and surfaces forming and things like that. The same types of things that the students need to be able to visualize in order to perform on the standardized tests. Okay, so it's not surprising that if you look at pre-test and post-test scores, and here this graph shows scores over a number of years, 6 years, the post-test scores are higher than the pre-test scores. The students have gone through.
Stephanie,
Mm-hmm.
interrupt a minute.
Yeah.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Your slides are lagging behind for some reason. Yes, your slides are lagging behind some. Now it's moving. Yeah, okay, so
okay.
That's fine. Go ahead. Now we're on we're just seeing the slide direct access training, so maybe there's a little time lag. But go ahead. That's fine.
Okay. Thanks for reminding me of that. Krishna Sridhar had warned me that might happen. So, okay. Okay, so it's not a big surprise that students take the training, they learn how to do these problems, they get lots of practice, and then they perform better on the post-test. Okay, so test performance goes up. That's it's not a bad thing, but what is the significance of that with respect to success in STEM? Okay, so that's the big question. Does it improve the success in STEM? So at Michigan Tech, where they implemented this training for a number of years, they looked at different groups of students. And so the first group here is the students who passed the pretest with a relatively high score. And it shows their graduation rate. And I don't know, graduation rates vary a lot from country to country because the educational systems are so different. And in the United States, the graduation rates in STEM tend to be pretty low. So a 70% graduation rate in engineering is really pretty good. So that's what the students with strong spatial abilities had a high graduation rate. Okay, so then we look at the students who failed the pretest. They had very low spatial abilities coming in, but they took the training course and their graduation rates were almost as high as the students who came in with strong spatial skills. Okay, so what if they didn't take that course? What if they had poor spatial skills and didn't take the training course? And that is this group down here. They failed the pretest, they didn't take any intervention, and their graduation rate was just above 40%. So it's a pretty dramatic difference. This blue bar is the students who had poor spatial skills and did take the training, and you compare it to the lowest bar where the students had poor spatial skills and didn't get any training. Okay, and then so that's the graduation rate, and then we show a similar type of trend looking at the grades of those students. These are the middle bars, the students who failed the pretest and did not take the intervention, and their their grade point average on a scale of 4.0 was around 2.6. And then the students who had poor spatial skills coming in but did take the intervention had a higher grade point average, which 3.0, which is equivalent to a B grade or about 80%. Okay, so other things that this research group has looked at, they've also looked at the success in the early courses.
Stephanie, the slides. Stephanie, the slides haven't. Last 2-3 slides haven't moved. Can you maybe jostle them a little bit?
I'm not really sure.
Go back and forth, maybe.
Yeah. Oops.
Oh, I'm not sure why it's not moving.
Which one are you on, Krishna? Which do you
this is that spatial skills can be improved. You know, the typical gains in PSVT are from training course. So that's where we are, and for some reason it hasn't moved from that point. And I noticed that you talked about a couple of slides after that. And it's a technology, some glitch in the pro and technology, not yours. You just have to.
That's okay. We have a backup option if we want to switch, and I'll let Sridhar make that decision. But I did send a PowerPoint, but I can't open it. He would have to open it.
No, I mean, can you move your slides back and forth a little bit?
I am. Yeah, I did move them
back
and
it's not. Yeah. It's not moving. Yeah, it is stuck on this particular slide.
Make yourself the presenter and switch her back.
Okay, why don't I do that then? Let's see if that works. I'm going to make myself a presenter, and I can make it back to you, and then you have to show, show your screen after that. Okay, let's just try that. Okay, I'm going to first showing my screen. And then I'm going to give it back to you in just a second. Now it's on my screen, and I'm going to give it back to you now and see if that makes a difference. Yeah, now I see a bit different slide than I saw before, so go ahead. Yeah. We see the slide, does this improve success in STEM? That's the slide we're on now.
That's the one you're on. So I'm on a different one.
Okay, Michigan Tech University graduate and rates in engineering. That's success.
That's what you're on.
Yeah. Okay. That's
All right. So you didn't see this slide before, is that correct?
No, we haven't seen this before.
Okay, so let me just, I'll say it again, maybe a little bit quicker, but okay, so this is the slide that shows the graduation rates, and as I explained, the graduation rates in the States tend to be lower than in some countries. So students with high spatial skills had a pretty high graduation rate in engineering, at least for the United States, and that was about 70%. Students who failed the spatial skills test and did not take any training to improve their spatial skills had a graduation rate of just over 40%, so much, much lower. So you can see that those students are really at a disadvantage if they have low spatial skills. But what if we give them a course to improve their spatial skills? So this blue bar shows the students who had the poor spatial skills. They failed the pretest, and then they took a training course, and their graduation rates were almost as high as the students who came in with the strong spatial skills. So that's some pretty good evidence that there's a link between
Okay, hold on, Stephanie, hold on. I think there's something else going on here. Today may be a bad day for this technology. They're still seeing my thing, so I'll have to go back and forth and see what's going on. I'm going to make Sridhar the organizer, the presenter, and I'm going to check on screen why they're seeing my screen still. Okay, now click on show my screen, Stephanie.
Yep.
Now.
Oh, okay.
Go back to increase and show my screen.
So I'm going to try changing the slide.
Okay, so either are you okay? Yeah, try changing the slide, that slide.
Okay, I changed the slide. Do you see another slide?
Yeah, now we see a different slide. It's the effect of SS training. And so either are you able to see the new slide now?
Yes.
Effect of it. Okay, good. Now I think you're all set now. I think, yeah, initially, in the first 20 minutes, you were doing fine. And after that, somehow it slowed down. Now you're fine.
Okay.
I'll read out the title of the slide and you can explain it. Okay.
Okay.
Effect of SS training on average grades. So go ahead.
Okay, good. So this shows a similar thing, but this actually shows the grade point average of the students who failed and took the intervention. Their grade point average is a 3 out of 4, which is a B, which is about 80%. And then failed and did not take the course. They have a lower grade point average, around 2.6. Okay. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention about this is that this group has done a lot more work. These are all longitudinal studies with a large number of students over many years. They've also looked at how this improves performance in particular courses, and what they've seen is that it really improves the performance of students in the lower level courses. So those courses that students tend to struggle with, like a computer graphics course and some of their calculus courses and things like that, the ones that really give students trouble early on, and that's where the spatial skills are making the biggest difference. Okay, so there's still some questions
now we
remaining.
see the slide, questions about direct training.
Yeah, good. Okay, so still some questions that need to be answered about the direct training. Sometimes we look at these results and it looks like a magic bullet that, if we give our students one course in spatial skills, that they'll magically be better engineers. But there's still a lot to uncover, and it's unclear which method of improvement is most effective. There are a lot of different techniques being used, the blocks, the sketching, the computer software. We don't know what's effective. We don't know if the particular computer software is the best type of, best way of training, or, if we should be using the computer software differently. So there are just a lot of things to explore, but we do see some difference in what's done so far. So this is really encouraging that we can make a difference in student success in STEM. One of the things that our research group is looking at right now is developing a different type of software that's more interactive, thinking that might be a more effective way to increase spatial skills. Okay, new slide, academic experience.
Yeah.
Okay. So we also looked at the effect of different academic experiences, and this is an indirect treatment, looking at the types of courses that students take and how this affects their spatial skills. And I'm going to go a little bit faster just to allow some time for discussion at the end. So
Yep.
We looked at gender, first of all. We tested all the incoming STEM students in Ireland, and we saw, as we could predict, that the male students outperformed the females on 2 different spatial skills tests that we gave. Okay, that's not a surprise. We also looked at their leaving certification scores. These are a series of tests that students take before they enter the university. And this is what, in Ireland, what the universities use for selection criteria. So they take tests in many different subjects, from English to history to, chemistry, maths, and even some technical subjects that are elective, like engineering. And what we see here, I'm not going to go into detail, but we see that the women outperform the men on every single one of these tests. So it's exactly the opposite. They're outperforming the men on every single test in the leaving certifications. And these are basically their test scores that they're coming into college with. But when we give the spatial skills tests, the men outperform the women. So what's going on here? We wanted to dig down a little bit, and we looked at correlations between the spatial skills tests and those leaving certification test results to see if there were any courses that students might be taking that improved their spatial skills. And we came up with only one correlation that had any significance at all, and that was a course called Design and Computer Graphics. And I guess it's not surprising because this is a course that is thought to be linked strongly with spatial skills. But the students were offered this in their secondary education, and the students who took it did have much better spatial skills. So what this graph shows is these two bars are men and women who did not take that computer graphics course, and it shows their spatial skills tests, which are lower than the spatial skills tests of the men and women who did take the course. Okay, so the course increases their spatial skills. Interestingly, if this is the first bar here where my cursor is, shows a spatial skills test for men who didn't take the course, and the men outperform the women. But if you look at the students who did take the course, not only does everybody have higher spatial skills, but the women outperform the men. So, and that difference was small but significant. And then also we did a little statistical analysis, and the Cohen's D for the effect of this course was on the moderate, sort of strong, moderate to strong side, around 0.6. Okay, so that showed how academic experience can help the development of spatial skills. There's also been a few interesting studies on the effect of video games as an indirect treatment. And basically the results of these studies show that action games are the most effective in increasing spatial skills, and they actually have a pretty large effect size. Now, this only tests the effect of improving spatial skills between a pretest and post-test, and it has not been looked at whether the video games can increase success in STEM. No study has been done like that. But that's a study that needs to be done, because the nice thing about the video games is it takes it out of the classroom completely. Okay, so we've seen, just going to summarize a couple aspects of the presentation, and then we can have a discussion. There's both indirect and direct methods can improve the spatial skills and can eliminate the gender gap. So we saw that the targeted intervention that used a variety of techniques had an effect, and this is the one that's really been studied with respect to success in STEM. We saw an indirect intervention with prior academic experience, and that was that Design and Computer Graphics course, which has a strong effect on spatial skills. And then another indirect intervention completely out of the classroom, and that's the effect of video games. Okay, another summary slide. Krishna, are the slides still with me?
Yeah. You're with you.
Okay.
Yeah, it sorted itself out.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Just want to make sure because we're getting very close to the end here. Okay, so the spatial training can improve STEM attainment. Poor spatial abilities serve as a barrier to academic success. So it's the students with the poor spatial abilities who we're losing in the courses early on in the engineering curriculum. And so an investment in spatial skills training can have high dividends, and it can be inexpensive and have lasting effects. Okay, so there's lots of future work that's needed. We have to understand the profiles of the STEM students who are coming in. What do our students look like in terms of spatial skills, and what are their prior experiences? This is going to vary a lot from country to country. And then we need well-controlled studies. We need to find the most effective methods of training and to use this knowledge to improve the design of interventions. So just where we want to go with this with IUCEE, we can establish a profile of spatial skills among Indian students in STEM disciplines, looking at first-year students, looking at high achievers in the disciplines, and try to understand what their spatial skills are and how those spatial skills have been developed. Once we understand that and some of the cultural factors that affect the spatial skills, we can look at which interventions are most effective and which interventions might be appropriate for your specific curriculum. And then finally, what's the impact of academic success in STEM. Okay, and now we have some time for questions, so I hope that we can get a conversation going.
Okay. So I'm going to go around and see if what questions have come in, but while I start reading the ones that have come in, I encourage others to send in your comments and questions, because this is something that IUCEE is going to work with Dr. Stephanie Farrell, trying to see whether they can understand what's going on in among the Indian students, and there can be something that we can do about it if there is an issue. So let me start. I think the first few comments had to do with the slides, and so I'm going to delete those. Let's see where we are. Okay, one question from Anil Kapoor is, what are the possibilities to achieve spatial skills by human-computer interaction?
Okay, so the human-computer interaction is that's a method that's been used in the indirect training as well as in the direct training. And it's still unclear what is the best way of using computer software to teach spatial skills, but it's shown the things that have been tried so far have had an impact on spatial skills. So we're still trying to optimize that and understand what's most effective.
Okay. Prashant Revankar, he is wondering whether this spatial skill, is it more of a right brain or left brain activity?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know it's been studied, and I can find out. There's definitely literature on that.
Okay. Narahari says, are there any online courses such as MOOCs for spatial skills which you would recommend for engineering students?
And I don't know of anything like that.
Okay, so I guess this is a new field, and people are still trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. Azim is asking, how can this training be conducted at our place? I mean, specific question. At any college in India, how can the training be conducted?
Okay, so I guess it depends if you're talking about the particular training that the particular direct training that Cheryl Sorby has developed. We're in discussions with Cheryl about possibly doing that in India. And then other possibilities are to introduce more spatial thinking into particular courses that already exist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just for information of all the audience, Stephanie Farrell and myself will be at the American Society for Engineering Education conference that is being held in Seattle on June 14th, 15th, and so we'll be discussing with Dr. Cheryl Sorby, who has developed that particular software course, and I think there are many courses. I think the other courses, other questions related to that course, and so. Somebody, so Sanjeev Kavle says, you mentioned a course, what actually does the course contain, etc., etc. So there'll be more details about that, I'm sure. A question from Ram Murthy, does it matter in the early stage of career of engineers? I think partly that maybe relates to does the course have to be taken at the early stage of the career? But I'm not sure what the question means. It says, does it matter in the early stage of career of engineers?
Okay, I think I know. I don't think anyone has looked at that specifically. people have looked at success in STEM careers over a long time, but a little bit further out, like 10 years into the career, and spatial skills are definitely important at that stage. Krishna, could I just take a minute and make one more comment about the
Sure.
training course, since we did have a couple of questions about that?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I mentioned that Cheryl Sorby had done this at her institution for many years, and they did it for credit, for academic credit, as a regular course in the curriculum. What we tried in Ireland this year was offering the course as on a strictly voluntary basis. And so we offered this training at a time, like in the evening, when the students could attend. We did see good results, but with very few students, because generally we found that students didn't have time for extra activities. So we didn't have very many students complete the training course. So that was an issue. But it doesn't have to be part of the curriculum. It can be an optional activity for the students, but just realize that it's a fairly large time commitment during their semester activity, so it's kind of tough to get people to participate.
Okay, I have a comment of my own before we move on to other questions. I mean, you did mention a huge impact of this course, design and computer graphics, and I'm wondering if some of the colleges in India already teach such a course, and if so, then maybe that's something worth looking at and seeing if that makes a difference at this part of the curriculum. I'm sure some colleges must be having computer graphics as part of their curriculum, so just to keep that in mind. Question from Prashant Revankar is there a correlation between math skills and spatial skills?
There is, and so if you look at like the models of cognition that psychologists have developed, most psychologists seem to be in agreement that there is this sort of general intelligence theory that where intelligence is, there's a hierarchical structure where the general intelligence is at the top. And then underneath that you have all these different cognitive domains. One is mathematical, one is spatial, and there are different models for that. So yes, there's a link because of the hierarchical model. The general intelligence, if you have a higher general intelligence, then you're likely to be higher in all the different areas, but they are also considered separate. So, they don't co-vary completely. There is some independent variation between spatial abilities and math.
Okay. Prakash Yadav says, are there any gender-specific personality tests that affect performance in spatial tests?
I'm
not sure about that question either.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know.
There may be some personality tests that people take, and maybe there's some things there, but maybe we can follow that up at some other point.
Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up on that.
Yeah. How about some role-playing techniques? Siddharth Dajeda is saying. Role-playing, I'm not sure what he means, but I guess maybe some other...
To improve spatial skills. I don't know. I don't know that anyone has tried that.
Okay. Dr. Desai, good evening, Dr. He's from BBB. Good evening, Dr. Stephanie Farrell. It's a very good approach. Thanks a lot, which can make a lot of difference, specifically first-year students. We will give this more thought and work on it. And Sandeep K says, can you recommend a few books for reference in the context of spatial skills?
Books. I would say, there's the workbook that Cheryl Sorby has for improving spatial skills. I don't know if this is for improving spatial skills or for learning about spatial skills.
I think that's what probably he means, is something that they can to learn about what are spatial skills, and textbooks of the textbook type of thing, or maybe papers for reference or something like that maybe.
Yeah, I can give some journal article references.
Yeah, so what we can do is after this webinar, if you can put together a few, whatever, based on the questions, we can email it to all the people who attended.
Yeah.
Ramurthy says, it's interesting that the medical profession has lower verbal and spatial skills.
Yeah. Yeah, and everything is in their hands.
Right, from the spatial skills, because they're doing operation, surgery, and so on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's actually been some studies that people who do like laparoscopic surgery tend to have very high spatial skills. So there are some exceptions to that.
Okay. Okay. Prakash Yadav says, is there any study which aspects were improved in PSVT tests that women could outperform men?
I haven't seen any tests where women outperform men generally. We saw it with that DCG class, but we had a very small number of students, so I wouldn't make any sweeping generalizations about that. I think that the gender gap can pretty much be closed, but I haven't seen women outperforming men.
This is from Sushma Kulkarni. I think most of these engineering colleges, both India and in the US, they teach engineering graphics at the first year engineering level. So Shreya, does it help in spatial skills development?
It helps, but what we see is that the spatial skills training actually helps performance in those courses more than those courses would help develop spatial skills. If that makes sense. So it's students with low spatial skills really struggle in those courses.
So this course itself does not help improve the spatial skills,
yeah.
but
it does some.
Some, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but the bigger advantage is actually from the training. It helps people succeed in the course.
Perhaps there is to be a redesign of that particular course to incorporate some of these more basic skills.
Yeah, that would be a good way to do it. I think, if you're going to do sort of an indirect training method, that would be a good course to slide it into.
Like sketching and all, and that's something that I'm sure they do in engineering graphics, and maybe elaborate to build on that part of the course.
Yeah.
Maybe that can be a first part of an engineering graphics course. Anyway, how applications of spatial skills would differ among various engineering disciplines?
How applications differ?
Are they different? I mean, are the spatial skills different within different engineering disciplines?
They are. Yeah. I didn't show those data, but we have some good data from this year showing that the students' highest spatial skills tend to be in mechanical engineering, which makes a lot of sense because those are the students who are doing the most, I think, with the graphics. And there's a whole ranking. We had about 9 different engineering disciplines, but yeah, there's significant variation.
I guess we're running to the bottom of the question. There's one question that may or may not be. So Jadeja asks, are communication skills and connections between communication skills and spatial skills? Are there any connection between the two?
Hasn't been studied as far as I know.
Okay. And assessment of spatial skills, of course, you've already talked about. I mean, what specific tests do you administer to assess spatial skills? That you already talked about it, I think, right?
Yeah, there are several standardized tests. The one that is thought to be most closely linked to success in STEM is that PSVT test that I was talking about.
Okay, great. I think we have run out of comments, questions, as well as out of time. So we want to thank you for your patience and with the technology, which was a little bit quirky today for some reason.
I apologize.
No, nothing to do with you. I think the slides moving is not your issue. It's something to do with the software of the GoToMeeting. But I think it did very well in the beginning. It's kept on in the middle. At the end, it worked out fine. So we'll have to look into that. But so thank you for joining. It's a fantastic project that you're on, and it opens up lots of doors for thinking about new ways to improve the quality of engineering education. So I'm glad you're considering having some kind of a dialogue with IUCEE and maybe following up some work with maybe some of our colleges. So what specific follow-up would you recommend if you're going to do anything with IUCEE? I know we're going to talk with us now with Cheryl Sorby next month when we are in Seattle. Maybe that will shed some light as to how to proceed. But I think in the meantime, perhaps we can request some of the participants today, if their college has a particular interest in what we have talked about today, perhaps they should let me know, and we'll keep that in mind as we move forward and decide if we have to do some kind of surveys or some kind of additional work related to this in India. So would you want to add to that, Stephanie?
Yes, yeah, I have a couple specific things to add. So the first thing is I think there's a lot of value in just getting a profile of the spatial abilities of the students in India. So we can offer that through an online test. It would be like a pre-test. And that would help us understand what the profile is, and we could look at maybe their prior academic experiences to understand how their spatial skills are being developed. That could give us some information about maybe how to proceed with an intervention. Then there's the intervention that Cheryl has that we're going to be talking about at ASEE, which is a possibility to bring to different institutions in India. And we're also working on another type of targeted intervention that is just, it would be like a mini intervention to test how we can use software most effectively. So that's a study that's ongoing now, and we could bring that to India. It wouldn't be a big time investment. It would be like a couple of hours out of a class where students could test 2 different ways of learning spatial skills and see what's most effective. And that will help us design a better intervention as well.
Okay, so I guess how long does this the tests take, the online test you were talking about?
Yeah, so to do the online test, that's something that can be done in about 25 minutes. So, okay. If we did that plus a survey, the whole thing would be maybe a 45-minute investment for the students.
Okay.
And I think we get a lot of valuable information, and it might help shape how we want to proceed.
Excellent. Yeah, because after that we can decide what kind of an intervention program we want to have. Great. Yeah. So let us keep thinking about this and get some. And in the meantime, the participants also encourage you to send me an email, as to how you want to be engaged in this, and if the college going to be interested in being part of at least this survey and the pre-test part of it, and then later on, depending on what we see in the results, we can target a few, do a few pilot interventions and see what that means. And so after talking with Dr. Sorby from Michigan, where is she now? She was at Michigan Tech before, but she's somewhere else, you said, right?
Yeah, now she's at Ohio State.
Ohio State. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So thank you again, and Stephanie and participants who have been with us patiently. And let's see, there's one quick comment here. Okay, intervention course, that's that third duration. I guess that's something that we can talk about later. There are a couple of people already said, yeah, we're ready to move ahead. So okay, great. Okay, awesome. So I think there's a lot of excitement among the community, so we will follow up. So thank you very much, and have a good day.
Fantastic, thanks.
And have a good evening, everybody in the participants. And